has brought up a couple times your long-standing relationship, and he said yesterday you have the most beautiful drive he's ever seen.
Yeah. He's given me that a hard time on that for a little while now. Yeah, we were in the off-season program together in Green Bay and Mike McCarthy's quarterback school, which was really just an incredible experience for me. But so much was done in our footwork and mechanics and things like that, and I think I did well with it.
What was he like then? What kind of impression did he make on you initially, and how's the relationship developed over the years?
Yeah, my initial impression of Aaron, first of all, I recognized his talent immediately. I had just, come from Indianapolis and, spent 3 years with Peyton and obviously, saw the way he played and the way he threw the ball and all those things. And it was really immediate to me, seeing Aaron and saying, man, like, this guy's got like some really special gifts. You obviously, the arm talent, the athleticism, the release, all those things are so evident. But also, just his approach to the game. He's a very intelligent person, and I think, I was able to, see that in him as a young player. That was Aaron, his first offseason, going into his second year in the league, and you already sensed like, okay, like this guy's playing on a little bit of a different level than most. And just as far as the person, he was awesome. We got along very well. Played a lot of golf, ate a lot of meals. There's not a lot to do up in Green Bay, so that was kind of what we did. Yeah,
right?
Worked on football and then and played some golf when we had time. So he was awesome. It was a really special time in my life, and really fortunate to have had that experience.
Obviously, this is we're far removed from that. What kind of player is he now, as far as you can tell?
I still think he's at the top of his game. I think he's a top quarterback in the league, and you go through in free agency, and you watch all the available free agents and quarterbacks, and Aaron, was extremely impressive. I mean, he still throws the ball very well. He's accurate. He's so smart, and you can see his decision making. Doesn't take a lot of sacks. Doesn't turn the ball over. It was exciting, opportunity, when that started to become a possibility for us. I was really hopeful that it would all work out, and I'm glad that it did.
This kind of applies to any sport, but how does a guy who's not a Hall of Famer coach a guy who's one of the best to do what he does?
Well, I think it's just part of that relationship, and realizing that from my perspective, there's so much to learn from Aaron, so much to learn from his experience and how he sees things, how he sees the game. And I think part of our relationship now, and coach-player type of relationship, is me understanding how how he sees it. The ways that he's been coached in the past, that's important to me. What's worked, what hasn't, what is helpful to him, what isn't. Those are all things that we're gonna talk through and work out as we prepare for Latrobe and the season beyond.
How much does it help having a level of comfort, not only with you but with him too, between you two?
I certainly think it helpful for me, for sure. Just having a past and a history with Aaron. I think knowing who the person is, and I think that's the biggest thing. And and knowing like, okay, well, this is a guy that we got along very well, in the time that we spent together, and was very excited, to see him. The first, I saw him a couple years ago when I started coaching for the Chargers, and ran into him when we played the Jets, and it was just awesome to see him, and now to be in this situation where he's here, in Pittsburgh, and I have a chance to work with him on a daily basis. It was really a special opportunity for me for a lot of different reasons, personal and just the growth, that it will provide me, as a coach, being able to coach a player of his, experience, number one, and certainly the success that he's had, and and also being able to learn, from him is going to be very valuable for my development.
Did you play a big part in basically like the recruiting of him here?
No, not really. He when he came in for his visit, it was great. I knew that something was going on. Mike and Omar were scheduled to be at a pro day, and all of a sudden it was like 8 in the morning, and I saw them both walk by my office. So I'm like, okay, something's going on, but I didn't know exactly what. Figured Aaron may be showing up at some point, And sure enough, maybe about an hour later, he walked right into my office. I had no idea. Nobody gave me a warning or anything. Aaron just walked in, and it was awesome. It was great to see him, and being able to spend some time with him, like that, and just respecting his his process and and his timeline, and that was I think that's something that was expressed from the top of our organization down, and certainly from our standpoint was just, hey man, like this is a special place, with a bunch of special people, a special tradition and history, and one of the truly iconic organizations in the National Football League, and I think it ended up being a good fit for Aaron.
He said you're the smoothest drop he's ever seen. I don't know. What kind of compliment is that for you when he says something like that? And how much were you able to teach him early on?
I don't know. We had a great time together. It was, Mike McCarthy's, first year in Green Bay. We went through the quarterback school, which is kind of a famous deal, for Mike McCarthy, and it was so beneficial for me. I so much of what I believe as a coach and how I coach the fundamentals of playing the quarterback, and really even just schematically, so much of that I can take back to my time in Green Bay and being around Coach McCarthy and in that quarterback school. It was so valuable for me, and it was fun. It was just Aaron and I. We were the only two there, and I still got the binder in my office, and it was about 120 hours of meeting time, in that off season from like February till whatever it was, April, before OTAs and all that started. So, all those meetings, all that time on the field together, it really certainly helped me become a better player, and I'm sure Aaron, would echo that, that was a big part of his foundation and his career, and being able to get off to such a great start when he first became a starter, and obviously to have the success that he's had over the extended period of time that he has, is elite. It's rare.